the last 3 years, I got really interested by blockchains. I knew about it before, but I wasn't deep in it. But 2 years ago, I started to study it really, really deep. And as a good student, I did a lot of work and learned quite fast about how it's working. And so 2 years ago, we started with a friend, we started that Move Token project. That was quite an ambitious project, I should say. We didn't know it was so hard to do. Because as you know, all the different blockchains, they have their own idiosyncrasies. They are all different. They have all different interfaces. So we had basically to invent or reinvent what the internet did before. As you know, before the internet, what we had was just a big bunch of local networks, not really being connected together until the internet protocol came, and then they became all interconnected. So the inter-blockchain is basically this, connecting the different isolated networks, because a token or a blockchain is basically a network of servers. So connecting these isolated islands with bridges between them in order that, let's say, you have a Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network, you can move it with that technology, you can move it to another platform and not being dependent solely on a single technology. So allowing it to evolve, because as you know, we are now with the third generation of blockchains. Very small, very, very small. We're only 6.
You are able to recognize that a dollar remains a dollar, regardless of the database on which it is represented, despite whichever banking network it is on. Is this the primary motivation that led you to consider the same kind of use case on the blockchain networks? So that if a dollar on the Bitcoin network can be ported over to EOSIO ecosystem and the value is retained?
Yes, exactly. Because when I compared the different systems, like the actual fiat system and the blockchain, both they have their strengths and their weaknesses. So I simply one day I took a piece of paper and draw 2 columns, and on one side I got fiat, and on the other side I got blockchains, and I started to write down the pros and cons or the strengths and weaknesses of each one, and it became obvious. By doing so, it became obvious. So let's say, for example, the blockchains, the strength of blockchains is transparency. Banks are really opaque. You don't know what they do, but blockchains are really transparent, open. Everybody can see what's happening in that. I think that blockchain, well organized and with good rules, could eventually prevent corruption, because it's all open. So how a guy can be corrupted when everything is open? The best weapon against corruption is transparency, bottom line. So I don't know how it will evolve, but at least we have a tool to do so. So good point for blockchains. The other good point for fiat, though, is independency of any technology. Oh, bad point for blockchain on that side. So this is why we're doing the inter-blockchain. The other good point that they have in fiat, easy to use. And also just the credit card or Apple Pay or whatever, it's really easy to use. The problem we have with blockchains, they have a long hash key, sometimes complex. In fact, EOSIO did a good point on that, because they made a lot of innovation by having better names. But the other guys know, it's if you take Ethereum or blockchain, Bitcoin. It's, I cannot remember this long hash. It's impossible. So user interface, ease of use, this is missing in the blockchain realm. And this is a good point that they have on the fiat domain. The other point also is how do we prevent the common guy to not be scammed or have their funds stolen? Like in the last year only, roughly $1 billion US dollar were stolen in the different exchanges. That's a huge amount of money. Think for a moment what you can do with 1 billion. This is a big negative mark for the blockchain. This is why we need some rules. Anonymity is right for sometimes, but wrong if people get stolen. What we need though is to have good rules and a way to prevent government to go too far under control. So it is basically a network of nodes, and these nodes, we have different roles for them. We are now using this internodes, this network, for the purposes like the liquidity sharing, because we added some value to what the other guys did, the other blockchains did. We took that layer and we improved it by adding channels. So we are now using channels for the auditors, channel for the liquidity, so we can add value on this network because the network is already there. Yes, in fact, it's true. We have to recreate, let's say, the Bitcoin, for example. We have to recreate a Bitcoin equivalent on each network. Basically, the other guy, the source could be anything, a single ledger or multi-ledger source, no problem. But the destination obviously has to be a multi-ledger type of network. So Ethereum, Stellar, all the EOSIO, and now Hedera, and all the other guys. So we have to create the very same characteristics. So if on the Bitcoin network we can have up to 21 million Bitcoins, the synthetic version of the Bitcoin on, let's say, EOS will have the very same characteristic, only 21 million. So we create a reserve. This reserve has that amount of Bitcoins already stored. So when we move one Bitcoin to another one, or it has these characters, I would say. It has no fun, but it has the very same characteristics. When we move a Bitcoin from its own network to, let's say, EOS, then in that case, we transfer some funds from that reserve to the user's account. So on that network, there is a contract there that will do the transfer from the reserve to. And then the guy gets its fund with the synthetic Bitcoin. Now, I think your next question will be, why don't you use atomic swap? And the main reason is that with atomic swap, you cannot redeem back this value, because that's it. It's always a single shot transaction. But if I want to redeem back, let's say I'll give you a simple scenario. Alice and Bob, our two main actors that we have in the blockchain realm. So Alice is moving, let's say, 5 Bitcoin. Alice has quite a lot of money. She's moving 5 Bitcoins to EOS. Because she likes EOS, because it's fast, you can trade there faster than Ethereum or whatever. So she does that, and she has a great DEX there. She likes it. So she moved that. and she wants to sell these 5 Bitcoins on the DEX hosted on the EOS network. Now you have a guy. In fact, the guy said, oh no, 5 Bitcoins too much for me. I will buy only 2. So he buys 2 Bitcoins from Alice. Bob buys it. Now Bob got 2 Bitcoin replicas because they are proxy Bitcoins in the EOS network. So Bob now gets 2 replica Bitcoins on this network. So now this guy, Bob, wants to redeem the 2 Bitcoins because he wants to get the Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network because this is where they have their real value, not everywhere else. So he wants to redeem it. If it were atomic swap, he had to find a third party to do so. But what the hell, he don't. But if we have the notion of reserves, no problem. When we move the token from the Bitcoin to EOS, that Bitcoin was stored in a reserve there. So out of the circulation, not burned, simply moved to a reserve. So now when he wants to move it back as a fraction, not the all 5 Bitcoins, but only 2, we can move them back from that reserve to Bob's account. So it allows to do a 2-way communications that way. So this is the trick. Obviously, you have a lot of security features in order to prevent fraud and all that. We're using 2-way encryptions. So using SSL for downloaded information, HTTPS for instance, but also encrypting everything up within the SSL. We're using different keys between the server and the client. The client has also a set of private and public keys for these transactions. So there's different layers of security we added. And we are adding even more now with the TSS, a new technology that you probably heard, which is the threshold signature. The private keys are not stored anywhere. They are constructed by a set of agents. So the private key in that case will be created by shares. We call that shares. This is part of the algorithm finding points on the line. And the shares that the client already has. So when he wants to sign, the server brings his share, the client already has his shares, and now he has a private key. It's not stored anymore. So more secure in that sense. And also other security features, in order to make sure that nobody can mess up with the system. And as you know, it's a spy against spy game. And I cannot expand on that, but I worked also in this kind of sphere, and I was on both sides. So I know this is really a spy against spy game, and we have always to keep going in order to, fight against the hackers. So it's a never-ending story. So we never will stop our efforts to bring more security and new schemas and watch and everything. Because we know the hackers, they're very bright. They go for it. If they see a honeypot, they go for it. So our main task will be to defeat them as much as we can. So this is how it works.
That's interesting. Sorry. In fact, my next question was on security, but you have handled that one quite well. But just to take you back a bit into the reserve, and in our example where we are talking about Bitcoin and EOS, and Bob and Alice having to operate between these two networks, with Alice moving her Bitcoin into the EOS network and receiving a synthetic version of Bitcoin, selling the synthetic to Bob, and Bob wanting to move back into the Bitcoin ecosystem, into the Bitcoin network itself, so that he can make his own operations there. So I wanted to know, have you done 2 contracts, one for the Bitcoin network that locks in this value that Alice has, and does it have a corresponding contract on the EOSIO side, and is it a communication between these two contracts through your network that allows for the transactions to happen on the two networks separately?
No, in fact, it's even simpler than that. The best thing that we can do is I can show you a demo. You'll see it.
Please go ahead.
It's basically the only contract that we do is on the end, the destination. But the source, it's the contract already there. We don't touch it. It's already where you have there. But on the destination, it is our contract. In fact, our improved contract in the case of EOSIO with the approved thing in order to trade. And in the case of Ethereum, it is the ERC20. So the DEXs using 0x protocol can use it. So it's only on the destination. But on the source, it's not our contract. It's the basic contract that is already there. And you'll see the trick. The trick is to trigger all that. You start by filling a form, which will create a transfer request. And then you have a new screen with our interface. But this thing is a service. So it could be used with any kind of UI that you can imagine. If a third party wants to use it, yes, they can. They can use our service. But at the moment, we have our own UI. So it's not restricted to it, but for the moment, we have that one. And so the next screen after you fill the form, the next screen shows you a QR code and an address where you can send the funds. So you do a payment to this reserve. So now it's out of the circulation. We'll listen with a monitor that blockchain for that transaction. And as soon as we have a confirmation, which in the case of Bitcoin is 3 different confirmations from the miners. As soon as we have these 3 confirmations, it means, yes, it's confirmed, it's in the blockchain. Then we trigger the transfer in the other blockchain. So I'll show you that. Good point. In fact, yes, we got some fundings from angels 1.5 years ago. And yes, we are doing a crowdfund in the following weeks with the TLD token that will issue. So people will be able to buy it. It will be, its value will be set at 5 cents. So that we pick 5 cents not to have a too high value, so that people don't have their token decreased in value but increased in value. So it's better that, you know, we moved from 5 to 10 cents and up instead of, you know, going down. So that's why we didn't follow the trend of having, you know, $1 for it, and, you know, or more, and then seeing it fall. No, we are very modest. So this is one part, and obviously we're right in the middle, so to trying to get some VC funding because we need to expand the team, and we have some developers waiting impatiently to work with us. In fact, guys I worked with in the past, very brilliant guys. In fact, that's why we're so productive, because our guys are very productive, very brilliant guys.
You just mentioned something, and it created an idea in my mind for a question. You have mentioned real estate, and there's all these other digital assets that are coming online. There's a network called Wax, and Wax is going to give people the ability to trade valuable assets on that network. Is this also something that you're seeing as a use case on your platform? People being able to maybe issue credit on their digital assets by having their assets on the contract and generating a more liquid kind of currency or token on the other network and operating with it.
Yes. In fact, we expect that we can get enough funding through this token in order to have the pool of developers involved in the project to develop future or option contracts, NFT, non-fungible kind of contract. 2020 is a big year because, as you know, the FAFT work group, which is an internal group working on counter-terrorism kind of thing, they submitted a recommendation to countries. And as you know, we are licensed in Canada on FinTrack, which is the equivalent of FinCEN, and we have also an AMF license, so we are fully compliant. And we are doing the same thing on the different jurisdictions like the USA, Europe, and Australia, actually at the moment. I think 2020 will be a big year when, in June, in fact, several countries decided that they give to the blockchain actors until June 2020. Mainly FinCEN decided that, but all the other guys like FinTrack, they're following the same path. So we have a certain period to adapt, but I know most of them won't, which is unfortunate. But on June 2020, everybody will have to comply to the FinCEN rule. Otherwise, they will have a fine. The minimum is 5,000 per day until it is becoming compliant, which can become very expensive for somebody. Just the time to get the registration, you have the counter, going up and up and up, because these guys, they will take their time. They won't rush, because it means for them, and if you don't pay, you can go to jail, because it's a criminal infringement. So it's very serious, very, very serious. It's not criminal everywhere, but in some countries, like the United States, could be considered as criminal. So basically 2020 will be the compliance year, because these guys, they look after the money, for sure. And that will be like a big honeypot for them, because they'll be like praised, these guys are so innocent, did nothing, and that's it. So that will be a big year, where the rules that banks, money transmitter, money services are already following will be enforced by the feds. In the case of the USA, and the feds here also in Canada, same way, Australia, same thing, UK. And in Europe, they already said it. It's now official. So I say it's good and bad. Anonymity is gone. That's it. Not totally, but it will be a fight for some years. And part of the actual legal network, like Bitcoin, may become the dark net in that case. Which is not a good thing, because that was a great innovation. And so 2020, that will be the year of where rules will be enforced. The good point, though, is that a thing like 1 billion stolen in exchanges will be something of the past, because it will be harder and harder to hide, because we'll know who stole the money. We'll have his address, his name. So the guy wants to redo it, because that's why, because of the QIC. So that's the good point. It will be very hard to steal now. I mean, to rob the bank, because we'll know the banker, and we'll know where the banker, not the banker, but the robber, will know where he lives. So, which is not a good thing for them. So this is the good part. It will bring more discipline. I think 2020 will be like the web experimented before. The web, we got this exuberance, irrational exuberance, and then we got at the next phase, Facebook, Amazon, Google, these guys. Now they're too big. That's the problem. But from that emerge something useful. I think in 2020, the scams, the funny projects, they'll be all gone, and the real value will come in. And obviously with more rules. But the good point is that we have until June 2020. It's 7 months. That's way enough to prepare ourselves to be ready. And if other guys, they need help on that, we're here. We can help. Not so many hours because we have to produce, but we're good guys. We can help the others. But if I have a point I want to make on that, to the other projects, please watch the actual thing that the FinCEN, FinTrack, and all these guys said, because we have 7 months to react. So please, watch this and be ready. The worst thing that can happen is that good projects could be jeopardized because of the simple, stupid things and not being compliant. So yes, and I think in the following years, we'll have great projects because scammers, robbers, all of these guys, they will be gone and real stuff will come in.